How's it going, everyone? Coach Braden here with Look Like You Lift, and welcome back to the Beyond the Barbell podcast, where we're going to be talking things fitness, weight loss, strength training, and possibly even more stuff. So today I am very honored to have, I'm going to butcher your last name. Is it Pellish?
Yes.
Perfect. Olivia Pellish.
Butcher free.
She's a TikTok superstar at this point. Let's see. How did we meet? We probably, I remember.
Someone tagged me in your video and expected me to debunk you.
And we actually agreed. It was something on reverse dieting, was it?
It was. Yeah, it was reverse dieting.
That's cool. Yeah.
And I was like, no, I like his information. That's great.
Yeah. And then we just, from there, like I started really vibing with her content. And I want to kind of give her the floor there. We're going to be talking about a lot of really cool things today, but before we get into it, Olivia, why don't you kind of go over how you got started, your recent graduation? If you want to talk about that, I'd love to hear more about, just kind of like your story.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, I just graduated from college at 28 and it was just kind of up and down. It's been, obviously 10 years in school is quite some time. And I was so ready to be done, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it kind of led me to, I'm now pursuing further education already. I promised to give myself a break, but I will be, going for my master's and doing some research and stuff like that.
What's your master's going to be in?
Oh, that's a great question. I have no idea. I have a couple of people who are weighing in and they're like, you should do this or you should do this. I don't know yet. I'm just going to, take my time and enjoy some time off of school. But it really did get me started into research, which is kind of where, that's something I noticed about you and your content is you also use articles and you dive into research and you back up what you say. And I'm sure we can both agree there's not a lot of that online right now. It's a lot of people just, sharing their opinion, which is fine, but you have people take that as fact. And so I think that's where people like both of us can come into play, is providing more than just our opinion.
Sure. Well, my big thing is I've been saying on TikTok lately is like, your opinion is worthless. My opinion is worthless. All of our opinions are worthless, but some might have a little more merit to them than others. Yes. So
yeah. And you've been coaching what, 9 years?
Been doing this for 9 years. Yeah.
Okay. I'm coming up on year 9 as well. So I got started, and you know this about me, but I actually found out I had ADHD at 19. And so that led to failing out of school the first time and, all these super fun things that happen to people with ADHD. And during that time, I did start to train people. So I was like, well, school might not be working out well for me, but I still want to learn. I still want to get out there. So I started taking clients at 19 and got certified, did all the things, and then realized that school would be a good thing to finish. And so, talked to a doctor about treatments for ADHD, finally, decided to try medication, and I graduated. What do you know?
So what made you,
all good things.
So what made you want to pursue a degree instead of just maintaining a few certifications and just recertifying every couple of years? That's definitely easier, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it's because I realized that research was just so far above my head. And most of the articles that I was being referred to, even for questions about clients, I couldn't really handle the information. I was like, I don't know how to read research. Like it's extreme. It's really difficult to sit there as someone with no educational background and read an article and be able to understand how to apply that. Right. So I think it was, even though I was training and it would have been fine had I not got my degree, I think I wanted to do more with my life than just be a trainer for long-term purposes.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. And I mean, you definitely do a fantastic job of not only like pulling up the data, but also doing a wonderful interpretation on it. And I think that's one thing that is missing a lot on TikTok is I do see quite a few people cherry picking studies and only taking a look at the ones that fit the narrative. Right. And you've probably seen that too. So quick question for you. How does one how does one go through the research and not get into the nasty habit of just looking at the cherry picked research that fits their bias?
That's a great question. Humans will always want to confirm their bias. We all want to be right. Unless you are actively aware of things like confirmation bias and about both sides of the research being supported technically, it's kind of hard to come to terms with the fact that, yeah, you can find an article that supports you, but if you're not reading the methodology and looking at the grand scheme of literature that is out there, that might be a one-off study, you know, right. Or not to say there's anything wrong with one-off studies. Sometimes those turn out to be very useful. But as soon as you set down your ego and accept the fact that maybe you might have been wrong about something, which we all have, like we all used to believe really stupid stuff, I'm sure, then you'll end up learning a lot more, if that makes sense.
Totally agree. I had a professor who told me a great way to confirm your position or confirm your thesis was go out and actively try to disprove it. Mm-hmm. And if you have a hard time disproving it, then you might actually be on the right track. So that was
yep.
Yeah, that was a really useful tool. And that actually kind of, we use that in science, but that kind of like bled into my own personal views when it came to politics, when it came to theology. Same. It's like, let me actively try to disprove this. And oh shit, like actually whole new rabbit hole.
I may have been wrong. Like,
yeah.
Whoops. That's really funny. We actually had to debate. So relevant to what we're talking about today, we had to debate certain topics for my last 2 semesters of school, and we couldn't pick teams. Obviously, the professor would assign us certain teams, which is how I stumbled upon this health at every size concepts that we're going to talk about later. But I had to argue for the side I didn't want to argue for, and then I was like, "Oh, okay." Whoops. So I learned some things.
That's cool.
Yeah. Arguing against yourself is a good way to learn.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy way to learn as well. Yes. All right, I want to pick your brain. So health at every size. I think you probably agree that most people who have any kind of relative semblance to fitness would disagree that you cannot be healthy at every size. So I really liked your last TikTok that completely shut that person down. It was the Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was a clown show. If I can find the footage, I'll throw it in here, but I loved it. It was awesome.
It was so funny. Like, I'm just like, listen, at this point, I have so much data to support this idea. Don't come at me with this. Like, don't do it. For your own sake, to be honest. But
yeah, so I want to pick your brain on it. So What are your views on health at every size, and what have we misunderstood about it?
A lot. So first of all, like any other issue, there are 2 sides. There is the side that there's nothing wrong with obesity. It's 100% benign. Body fat has no adverse health outcomes, whatever. There's the other side with, anyone with a BMI above 25 is unhealthy. The truth, of course, is somewhere in the middle. So that's where this whole confirmation bias things comes into play. Is you can't really talk about this with people who have a strong opinion one way or another, because both sides, when they hear something that resembles the opposing argument, they tend to get triggered. And if you're even saying anything like the opposition, people will shut you down. And so it's interesting, again, to have to debate this with classmates, because I didn't realize where I really stood on the issue. And it just turns out that there's more up for debate than meets the eye when you look at this argument from a 30,000 foot view. So I have this article, and the cool thing, side story, the author of this article happened to be a professor at ASU.
Okay.
And that was just by chance. He's been talking about this stuff for years. This is his area of research. This is what he does with his life. Like 15 years ago, he went on Dr. Oz, made Dr. Oz look like an idiot. And Dr. Oz deleted the video. Like, that's like, he's been doing this for almost 2 decades or more,
That sounds like the coolest win.
He's the coolest guy. So I did not have him as a professor, but we got this article for the class where I had to argue it. And I saw the name and I'm like, it says Arizona State. Is that guy still here? And one of my friends was like, yeah, I have this guy as a professor. I'm like, I need you to get me in. Like, we got to talk to this guy. He's like, okay, I don't know if you want to do that. He's really serious, and like, you're you, so just be careful. I'm like, fair. So we get into talk to this guy, and I end up like picking this guy's brain for an hour and a half ish, and he is the coolest guy. So he sent me another article that would be better used for this topic. And the main things, again, they start out we're not saying that obesity is benign. No researcher in their right mind would say that. Nobody in their right mind is saying that. What we are saying is that when you run the tests again for the mortality risks associated with obesity, and you include the variable of cardiorespiratory fitness, the health risks seem to go away. So when you have someone who is, and they also state this is a low population, but when you have someone who is metabolically healthy and happens to be obese, you don't really see those health risks come up.
So can you describe what metabolically healthy looks like?
Yeah. So another thing about this article, this is 2021, by the way. So this was recent.
Sweet.
He basically complains about the definition of metabolically healthy or metabolically healthy obesity. He's like, there isn't really a good way to describe it because they don't include cardiorespiratory fitness. But the definition that we have working with right now is less than one or less symptom of metabolic syndrome.
Okay.
So these people have good biomarkers, and they, they have a low amount of visceral fat. So you have people with, it's more higher subcutaneous fat.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So it's just interesting that when that variable is included, it doesn't seem to be inherently because of body fatness that people are unhealthy. Right. And so he argues the issue is that we have associated way too much weight, no pun intended, with losing weight instead of let's work on these healthy habits and behaviors to ensure a healthful life. So it's just interesting because then you have people who, I don't know if you follow Matt Larfit. He's one of my friends from TikTok as well. He's a trainer on a run yesterday, and someone fat shamed him on the run. And it's just so ironic. Like someone rolls down the car window and is like, keep running, you fat ass, or something like that. He's like, first of all, I'm literally a trainer. Second of all, I literally run every day. What are you talking about? It's just like so silly. And I think of this article and I'm like, we do need to start including cardiorespiratory fitness as a vital sign.
Sure.
Because
so when you say cardiorespiratory fitness, are you talking like measuring VO2 max, or like resting heart rate?
Kind of those resting heart rate and blood pressure, I think, are already included, but VO2 max, and I believe, VO2 max is the one that they mostly have been measuring. And when that is controlled, first of all, you do see a prevalence of people across the BMI spectrum, low and high, who have great VO2s and are healthy, and low VO2s, low BMI included, so you have people who are, perhaps not overweight or obese that do still have these same health risks that are associated with being overweight. So it's just interesting to see all of those things, The other thing worth mentioning is that one of their arguments that I kind of liked was presenting this example of people going through fat loss surgery or weight loss surgery.
Yeah.
Those health risks aren't always equalized, I should say, post-surgery if that person does not take up these healthy lifestyle factors like exercise. So just because you get rid of the body fat does not mean that you now have a healthy person.
That's fascinating because that's what you're led to believe is lose weight, you'll get healthier.
Yes. And when you look at the research, there is, great improvements in health, even without weight loss. So when you have people who are overweight and obese adhering to cardio routines, weightlifting routines, you see drastic improvements in health, even when they don't lose weight. Some of them gain weight and still have those improvements in health.
Got it. So what we've been doing is associating a body composition with health, when in reality, it's the lifestyle factors that play a bigger role.
Exactly. It's the lifestyle factors that lead the person to obesity that end up being the harmful thing. So, and obviously
the negative connotation of an altered body composition is just kind of the byproduct.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's just interesting, and obviously I just got my bachelor's degree. I'm not a researcher. I don't know the full spectrum of this information, but it's worth looking into, especially as a trainer,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really, really cool. So would you say that our concept of like fat, a fat person being like unhealthy, would you say that that is just the result of society and like what we perceived healthy to be?
The concept of them being unhealthy, is that us or is that true? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like is that a concept that was just kind of like ingrained in us through society?
Yeah, I definitely don't think that every single fat person we see is unhealthy.
Right.
I also think that too much weight has been put on, like, okay, if you're fat, you're unhealthy. If you're small, you're healthy. That's not true. That's a false dichotomy.
Well, I've even seen some evidence of people who are too lean, like on the very lean side of things, can develop some health issues as well.
Exactly. I'm studying for the CSCS right now, and I was
Cool.
just reading about how when you're training women, getting too lean is not a good thing, you know? So you do have to watch, especially your competitors, your women getting too lean. That's not like, leaner doesn't mean healthier, you know?
You see that a lot in bodybuilding. Everybody perceives bodybuilding as like the pinnacle of health, and no.
Healthy where? We're all dying. What are you talking about?
You're literally getting on stage on death.
You're prepping right now, aren't you?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How far away are you?
I am, let's see, 7 weeks and 4 days.
Okay.
I'm not doing too bad.
Okay.
Knock on wood. I'm doing all right.
Good.
So this is my first time doing a bodybuilding show. I've been in the strength sports my entire career, strongman, powerlifting, which is like the complete opposite. You know, your strength is in your size. You got to get as big as you can to lift as much weight. I developed some adverse health side effects of that. But now that we're on this, it's probably not from the size per se. It was from the diet. It was from the lifestyle factors. You know, you're told if you can sit, lay down. If you can walk, drive. Like you're like, be as sedentary as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. So I left that, dropped about 65 pounds, and like I actually got pretty lean. And I was like, you know what, this would be kind of cool. Let's see how far we can take this. So,
I love that. That's so fun.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
There you go. Good luck.
Thank you. I'm gonna need it.
Yeah. No, you'll do great. It's a fun time.
So, all right. So look like you lift. So it's in the name.
Yes.
So how can women look like they lift? Because I think that's like a big thing now. Like all women really want it, which is so cool to see that it's now like, all right, like it's pretty badass to see women try to get as strong as they can. So what can women do to look like they lift?
Well, the number one thing, first of all, I just want to say this is part of my favorite part of training is like helping women lift specifically upper body. It is my favorite thing. I have had this happen maybe 14 times at this point. I've had a girl super small, super skinny, never lifted. She comes to me and she's like, I want a booty. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go. Start doing legs. And then maybe a month later, she's like, do you think I could ever do a pull-up? I'm like, there it is. Okay, now you're my client. Like, let's go. That is my favorite moment of training, hands down, is when I have the girls be like, you know what? How about a solid bench press? I'm like, I love you. Let's go. So in order to understand what women need to do to get jacked, you have to understand the differences between men and women. And there are differences. Well, post-puberty, there are differences. Pre-puberty, when we're looking at height, weight, and body size, we're basically indistinguishable. Most, elementary school kids are about the same size,
I haven't looked into this, but so what you're saying is prepubescence, they like, would you say even like strength and performance, like they're pretty much equal?
Yes.
Wow.
I would say speed. I haven't looked into speed. I've looked into strength. I mean, pre-puberty, girls start earlier. So then it takes the confounding factor. You only have data if you're talking pre-puberty from like 9 or 10 and below. And I would say 9 or 10, it's at least comparable,
Very
like,
cool.
Very small differences. Post-puberty and during puberty, obviously girls get huge deposits of estrogen, which leads to more fat, and boys get testosterone. So you get
toxic levels of testosterone and human growth hormone.
Yep. So you get protein synthesis and bone formation. Estrogen obviously leads to bone formation as well, but not to the same extent. On top of that, boys have a longer period of puberty. So their growth stage is longer, which is why it's the main reason why you see adult men being taller, stronger, bigger than adult women.
Because their growth process was just longer.
Yes. Okay. So we start from a relatively similar place in terms of height, weight, and body size. Again, I'm not sure on the performance part of it, but sure. Height, weight, and body size start relatively similar. Men have a longer growth phase and end up bigger as adults. And so strength-wise, adult women tend to be about 2/3 as strong in absolute terms. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's absolutely true that men are stronger in absolute terms than women. Lower body, funny enough, ends up being similar because women have more mass on their lower body, muscle mass, and it ends up being comparable to men. Upper body, however, we have to work for it. Sure. It's very unfortunate. But it ends up being like, even when you compare relative strength, upper body tends to be a little bit lower than men for women, because lean body mass is typically lower on upper body on women. But when you equate the relative strength based on lean body mass, those differences tend to disappear. So if we take lean body mass for two individuals, one man, one woman, relative strength tends to be similar across the board. So that obviously gives us, muscle quality is not sex specific, which is great to know. Women can absolutely develop great quality muscle. And that goes, so what I just said was in terms of strength. The same is true for power. So I want to differentiate between the two. Sure. And, I always get the question, well, how will I respond to resistance training? Like, will I gain size? Like, will I look huge overnight? And the answer is no. You will not look huge overnight,
We've been trying for 20 years.
I've been working on it. Like, come on. Like, if you could, I would have it figured out. You cannot. Yeah. However, you absolutely can make gains as a woman resistance training. And that seems to be, again, relatively speaking, matched or even exceeded when comparing to men.
Cool.
So, men, as we discussed, start at a higher baseline. Mm-hmm. You guys start with more muscle mass, more size, more strength. You can make, let's say you grew by 30% in whatever lift it was. Mm-hmm. Woman will start down here. Maybe they'll grow by 32%, maybe 33. Mm-hmm. And that could be because there's a lower neural drive at the beginning. It could be those neural adaptations taking a while to catch up because we don't lift upper body typically starting out. So that could be why, but you absolutely will have a matched relative amount of gains, if not exceeded, which is great to know. Absolute strength, it's not, again, you will end up higher the more muscle mass you have.
Sure.
But yeah, that's pretty much what I found.
So how does this apply to programming? Would you say that the programming is almost similar?
Yes, I would say it's a similar program. If you have an athlete, I would say, despite being male or female, you need to target programming to their athletic sport, whatever it may be. But if you're just talking general population, there's no reason why programming wouldn't be similar, men versus women. Of course, your absolute strength comes into play. So I'm not going to have someone who is a 5 foot, 120 pound female start out 185 on the squats, we'll work up to it. The starting point is going to be different. But as far as exercise choices and rep ranges and things like that, I program the same.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the reason why I asked this is I primarily only work with men, probably because only men want to talk to me. But that's why I'm trying to hire on more female coaches that's awesome. That's know their shit. But so you may not know the answer to this, but I'm just curious. So you've probably seen like the difference in physique when it comes to CrossFit women versus just like the recreational lifter. Do you know what causes those different, like that big difference in physique? Because obviously men, like a recreational lifter versus a CrossFitter, man, they look relatively the same, but like there's a distinct difference between females in the CrossFitter sport versus any other kind of like recreational. They almost look like beefed up gymnasts.
Right.
Can you describe that? Like, can you explain why?
Yeah, I have a couple of guesses. Again, I haven't looked into it,
Sure.
but I venture to say it's because the program of a CrossFit athlete is very comprehensive. You know, you're working everything. You're working, I mean, they have different workouts every day. You're working a wide range of things. Whereas, you know, a general population woman may not be involved in strength training. Yeah. And so when you have someone, I mean, CrossFitters, especially professional ones, like we're talking like Annie Thorisdottir and people like that, they work their ass off for years and years and years daily. You know, sure. They are,
they eat a ton.
And they eat a ton. And that's the other component of this is nutrition. Women, we have to start eating. like, like eat your protein, you know? That's the other thing is the nutrition side is like so vastly different than what we've been told our whole lives, but eat your food. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But the training portion of this, they're hitting every single movement pattern, muscle group. They're very, very well-rounded athletes. You don't see a CrossFit athlete doing booty bands in the gym. You know, they can do pull-ups, they can do push-ups, they bench press, they squat. Stuff. Yes, correct. And so when you train comprehensively and you hit all of those requirements, you're going to have a great body like that. You know, I don't know what their nutrition looks like. I venture to say they're also very high protein and they're eating their carbs and they're not doing keto. You know, like I don't think CrossFitters do keto. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Not ones that are notable. We'll say that.
Correct. Yeah. But that goes back to our conversation earlier. After my last bodybuilding show in, what was it, 2019, end of 2019, November of 2019, I went to CrossFit for the first time ever. I was lean. I was healthy, in air quotes, and I threw up.
I hate that
my
word.
First day of, I know. I threw up on my first day of CrossFit.
Damn.
Because we had to run a mile. Like cardiorespiratory fitness, I was not healthy. You know, like, are you kidding me? It's just another example of me being lean, but not necessarily a healthy person.
Sure. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. I was just curious about that. That just kind of got me thinking about it. So let's talk about food. So women have always through like the last, 40, 50 years, women have historically just starved themselves. What needs
the diets are ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen, I would venture to say that women are more receptive to some of the more extreme diets. I see it with my mother and my own in-law. Like,
oh yeah.
Every time we go visit them, it's a new diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, what do you think we don't need to eat? Like, this is part of it. You know, we have to do what it takes to build that lean muscle mass, especially for wanting to be stronger, you know? So when you look at protein requirements, the tables I use, the requirements I use don't differentiate between the sexes. So it's not like women amount of protein versus man amount. No, like I calculate protein needs based on lean body mass, you know, and that does tend to be higher for men than women.
Sure.
But that's what it's based on. You know, it's not based on your biological sex. That's ridiculous.
Right.
We still need protein. And hi, we bleed every month. So like, even then you need more protein during that time. You need more food during that time. Your body is working overtime. Like, that is not the time to diet because you feel bloated. You know, it's like all these weird, like, expectations lead to really weird diets, you know?
Tangent.
Yes.
So you mentioned menstrual cycle. Do you have your women eating more red meat because of that?
It depends on the woman. So, and that's kind of my answer for all questions related to periods, but it totally depends. I have people who are extremely sensitive to certain foods during that time, meaning like it just grosses them out. They get nauseous. I'm not going to force anything on those people. I'm like, look, just eat. I don't care what you're eating. Just make sure you're eating. And then I have people, that I'm like, hey, make sure you're getting iron. Make sure you're getting, you know, leafy greens, your red meats, all these things. It just depends on who it is. But typically I will say the people that I would tell that to, they do that anyway. You know, they're really good about that anyway.
Right.
But yeah, it's something you have to keep up when you're on your period. You just got to eat. So.
Very cool. So I got two more questions in terms of nutrition, because like you're blowing my mind here, because like I said, I only work with guys, right? So I've noticed, what's that?
It's an adventure.
Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's challenging primarily because if you're with someone who's trying to lose weight, especially in their menstrual cycle, you've got like what, 2 weeks where they gain water and they start bloating. So how do you work with someone who has a menstrual cycle, and how do you still gauge if they're making progress with weight loss when that's not necessarily going to manifest on the scale?
It's hard. And that week I kind of just say, look, I am someone who encourages weighing in. So I'll just get that out of the way. I encourage weighing in because I say desensitize yourself to the number. It's a data point. It's not your self-worth. It's not this, it's not that, whatever. So if that is true, and if you believe that, weigh in when you're on your period, it shouldn't matter. So you'll see, like their little like chart will be like, here's non-period week, here's period, but like over time it gets lower, but you'll still see that little jump. And so it's expected, but not to the extent you would think. So a lot of people, and I don't want to generalize, but a lot of people, there's memes about this, like eating chocolate on your period and eating all these, like you're overdoing it a bit. That doesn't have to be the case. So, and again, it depends on the person. Sure. But sometimes that isn't as extreme as it's made out to sound. Sometimes it is. Some people are like, I literally can't get out of bed. I'm bedridden. I'm going to be on ibuprofen and ice cream for the next week. And I'm like, cool, I'll see you when you get back. We'll make gains. It's fine. Others, they have a really predictable change. And then you'll see after the period is done, the weight will just go back down. Like it just plummets. It's like, okay, you got rid of all that water weight. There we go.
Cool.
So it resolves itself in a way most of the time.
Yeah. So so the weight gain is expected.
It's expected.
But it always comes back down. If you're making progress and if everything's working, it still always comes back down.
It equalizes in the end. And for most people, I would say, at least in my experience, it's not as dramatic as the memes make it sound.
Got it. Okay. All right. So last question when it comes to nutrition, how do we get women to eat more?
We've got to stop doing this thing about carbs. Like, I don't know what this is, but like, I got to talk to all my clients' moms, to be honest. Like, hey, like, stop. Like, I have full grown women, like 30s and 40s, who get together with their moms on holidays, and they're now 60, 70-year-old moms still carb shame. Like, stop it,
So, all right. So I have to tell you a really funny story. So every time, my wife's grandmother is this like super health conscious person, right? Or supposedly health conscious person, thinks that like organic snacks from Costco are healthier than like just regular snacks. So every time, So every time that we go over there on a blue moon, she will justify the foods that she has laid out. She'll like, I didn't even say anything, but she'll just be like, this is healthy because this. And it's like, honey, I don't give a shit. I'm here to enjoy dinner. So I wonder if it's like just a matter of like self-esteem.
Yeah. They feel shame. Like the grandmother in the story feels shame about it. So
how do we stop that?
Shame is nasty. I don't know. It's nasty. You just have to, I think, presenting the data and educating is number one. So you'll feel shame about carbs if you think carbs are inherently bad for you, know, and once you learn that they're not, and that you can, hit gains, lose weight, whatever your goal may be, you can do that on a high carb diet. You'll get over that. My favorite thing is how people assume, like when you have someone who has PCOS or whatever, that a low carb diet is the answer. I'm like, where? What are you talking about? I have a girl who lost, I think she's at 45 pounds now, down with me. And I have her eating over 200 grams of carbs a day.
That's awesome.
I'm like, no, dude. She's, this is one of my favorite stories of all time. Her doctor, her OBG, why couldn't I think of the word? Her OBG was, giving diet advice when she shouldn't be. And
stay in your lane, doctors.
Seriously. I'm like, come on, you can look at the area. I'll give the diet advice. These are our lanes. Let's go. And she's like, hey, low carb, whatever. And I'm like, ignore the doctor. If you go to your next checkup and things are not better, we'll talk to the doctor. Cause I always collab with the doctors on nutrition for my clients, because I alone, I'm not giving meal plans. I'm collabing with their healthcare provider. And so she's like, all right, I'll trust you. She drops, I think, 20 pounds before the next doctor's appointment. She walks in and the doctor's like, so I see you've been doing low carbs. And she's like, actually, this is my nutrition. She showed her like, and the doctor's like, what? I'm sorry. What? Like her mind was just blown. She actually offered, like, we might collab on something in the future, this doctor and I. So she's like, I would love to give you my PCOS girls and, you know, we'll do some sort of trade service there. I'm like, that'd be awesome. Send them my way because I will absolutely make them eat carbs. Like, that's just so silly. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just, there's this like, and none of this stuff is new. You know, if you go back to the early 1900s, you see women dieting in the same way. You see everyone dieting in the same way. It's like, these are all just recycled programs of like Atkins and like all these weird, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the white wine diet.
Yes.
This is stupid. Like, what are you talking about? I would never, like, come on.
Yeah.
It's just so dumb. So, you know.
That's funny. Well, we could stay here for 3 or 4 more hours and just pick your brain, but we'll probably have to have you come back for another one.
Yes.
So
for sure.
How can our followers find you? What's the easiest way?
My tag is Your Set Fitness. YOUR is the correct your. And that is the same handle on all platforms. So that's across the board.
Very cool. Well, we want to thank Olivia for coming on for the podcast today. Make sure that you go follow. Make sure that you go follow Olivia over on TikTok, Instagram. She posts fantastic content. Share this with your friends, share this with your family, share this with your grandma who has a little bit of self-esteem issues when it comes to food. And we'll see you in the next one.